Good morning.
Good morning.
This is going to wrap up the series I've been doing on stewardship and money. If you recall, I started a couple weeks ago talking about how not just the tenth, but everything is God. It's all God. And last week I talked about how we use it. Use it following the first and greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, soul, and mind, and then to also use it to love your neighbor as yourself. Now I want to talk specifically about the tithe, that 10% that we present. And I want to look at that a little more closely. And the first thing to notice in the way the tithe is described is that it is a tenth of all that your fields produce. Not a tenth of what you produce. A tenth of what your fields produce. What the writer wants to drive home is that we expect that you work hard. We know that you work hard. It's fine that you work hard. It's great that you work hard. You did not produce it. God produced it. And anybody who farms will tell you, you can work really hard all through the spring and the summer, and that doesn't guarantee what's coming up at the end of the year when you harvest in October in these parts. The fields produce it, that is, God produces it. It's not because I earned it. It's not because I worked so hard. Indeed, he says, if you have to bring this tithe too far because you can't, because the Lord has blessed you, what comes out of those fields, what comes out of my work, the produce of my work, is a blessing of the Lord. Indeed, the work itself is a blessing of the Lord. As the writer of Ecclesiastes tells us in chapter 5, right? There's nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and enjoy his toilsome labor under the sun. The produce is a gift of God. And so right at the beginning, we want to instill in people this notion that we are to be grateful. We are to be a grateful people. So if I think I earned it, if I think I deserve it, if I think it's mine by right, I'm not thankful for it. I've got it coming. I earned that. That's mine. But when I remember that it is not mine by right, that it is a blessing of God, then I am thankful for it and grateful for it. And I think personally, when I look out at our country today and the difficulties and struggles and the animosities and the anger that I see, what I see are a lot of ungrateful people. A lot of people who think, I have a right to that. I earned that. I deserve that. And so they're not thankful for what they have. We want to start out by remembering that everything we are and have is a blessing from God, a gift that I don't deserve, so I remember to be thankful for it. It is a gift of God. And I am. And when we bring our tithes and our offerings like we do, we celebrate it and we surround it with thankful songs. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. In chapter 26, where it also talks about the tithe in Deuteronomy, it tells you, it has a very straightforward formula on how you bring the offering. You bring the tithe and you place it before the altar of God, and you remember and you say, my father was a wandering Aramean who had no home and no place, and you brought us into this land out of slavery, and you established us with vineyards that we didn't plant, and fields that we didn't plant. In other words, when we present our tithes and our offerings to God, we recount how God has blessed us. It shouldn't be a chore. It should be a celebration. And so when we put it in the context of worship service, we do want it to be a celebration. It is, in that celebration, in that gratitude, an act of worship. Indeed, that's the purpose of it, right? It's what it says. We want you to present this tithe to the Lord your God in the dwelling place where he will choose as a dwelling for his name, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. That in that gratitude for the whole that God has blessed us with, we remember to revere, to worship our God who has blessed us so much. In fact, not just bringing our tithes and offerings up here, but whenever we use the resources that God has entrusted to us. When I go to Kohl's and I'm able to buy clothes, that should be an act of gratitude and grateful worship to God. When I go to the grocery store to find food and to pay for it, it's an act not just of buying food to feed the family, but it should indeed be an act where I think, wow, look at what God has blessed me with. The food that we eat as a matter of course, just a couple hundred years ago, was food that only kings and queens ate. Think about that. Most folks, a couple hundred years ago, regular, ordinary working folks, you got potatoes, and you got bread, and you got some cheese. You're going to have a nice piece of chicken, you're going to have a casserole, you're going to have some roast beef or some pork chops today, or bacon. God's a gift to us all. Regular folks didn't get that on a regular basis. We can. And so we are a nation of well-rounded individuals. But we thank God for the gifts that he's given us so we can do this. Just think the variety of vegetables that are available too. The variety of fruit. All of this, whenever you are able to buy food and groceries and clothing, when you're able to buy a place to stay or a car to drive or put gas in it, it should be an act of worshipful thanks to God that you can do it. In the same way that we worship and thank God and bring our offerings to him on a Sunday. Because we remember the sacrifice of the blood of Jesus that made us to be a people that cleansed us from our unrighteousness, that brought us into God's house and made us his special treasured possession. So when you bring your treasure before God, remember what Jesus says in Luke, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. How much of my heart am I putting on the altar today? How much of my heart, each day, each time I pull out that credit card or debit card or my cash, how much of my heart am I putting before God? To worship the Lord your God with our tithes and with our offerings, with our finances, with all of our resources, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. And then the writer of Deuteronomy gives us some ideas about how to worship. The first thing he says is party time. Eat it. If you can't bring it, bring the silver. And when you get there and you're in the presence of God, buy cattle or whatever you like, wine or other fermented drinks. I guess they had beer back then too. And have a party in the presence of God. Celebrate all of the things God has done for us. Potlucks. Trunk or treat. I mean, it's not just we're going to have trunk or treat out here and give candy to a bunch of kids. What we are doing in that trunk or treat is celebrating the gifts of God. And with an attitude and a heart that is devoted to God, that's more than just handing out candy. That is an act of worship, of gratitude, of thanks to God for all that he's given us. In a couple of weeks, on the 10th, when we have the dinner celebrating the veterans that have served in this country, who are part of this church family and extended family. Not just being veterans. We're celebrating the gift God has given us in this country and in the freedoms we have and those who have worked to preserve it. We're celebrating in the presence of God His blessings to us. The Thanksgiving dinner, when you invite somebody to your house after church to have dinner with you. We are, when we celebrate communion, when we sing here, like we had with the choir, when you sing, and it's just great hearing you sing How Great Thou Art this morning. We are celebrating before God. And the tithe helps us to do that. Piano ain't free. The music that we play ain't free. Riders Rock was good. Okay? The tithe helps us to celebrate God's gift as raucously as we do sometimes, and as quietly as we do sometimes. But the first thing we do with the tithe is celebrate that God allows us to bring it. And then there are two other things that he mentions. The first of which, do not neglect the Levites living in your towns, for they have no allotment or inheritance of their own. Those who work in the house of God and the household of God, to provide for them and maintain them. So that means, yes, this building, the parking lot, Pastor Bill's salary, our tithes and offerings go to pay for that. We just had a meeting this last week about the budget. And how do we pay for that? It may seem kind of boring, and it doesn't, just about paying the utility bills and the pastor's salary and stuff like that. But it's not boring. It is part of our spiritual act of worship with our whole heart before God. We don't like thinking about the foundation, and most of us ignore it after the building is laid, but without that foundation, the building doesn't stay standing. In conjunction with that, by the way, looking at our budget for the coming year to maintain, the fact is, since we started paying Pastor Bill a full-time salary, we've been running anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 shy a month. To make that up, and this is just the basics. Everybody who's giving something out, we need you to start giving an extra about $10 a week. To be precise,
$7.69.
$7.69 a week. About $10. That's part of our tithes and our offerings to take care of the Levite who doesn't have an allotment of his own. To take care of the church building. And this isn't a business where we sell and buy things and make a profit. But those of us who work and do engage in commerce and make a profit, we provide for the house of God and those who work in it. Not just to pay the bills. Remember, this is part of our worship, part of our celebration of God's gifts to us. That those who dedicate themselves specifically to the work of God, and that foundation needs to be laid. It's easy to give to missions. You know, it's always going off to evangelize those folks out there who feels good about it, or the Committee on Relief, we're going to give to that because we see this news stories about the hurricanes in Florida or the Carolinas, and it's all good and it all needs to be done. But that doesn't happen if local congregations don't continue with their local pastors and their local Sunday schools and their local choirs and their local music. If that foundation doesn't happen, none of the church's ministry that gets us real excited happens. And that even comes down to evangelism in our local area. Board of Trustees have told me that we need to redo the parking lot. Just redoing the existing parking lot is going to cost about $35,000. And if we're going to expand the parking lot, and we want more people to come, we've got to give them a place to put their cars when they get here. Just expanding the parking lot is going to cost another $25,000. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But here's the question. How much are we going to put of our heart on the altar to lay this foundation, to set this place up for that kind of celebration of God's gifts and mercies to us? gracious and merciful to us in this congregation. It's been about a year and a half since I first started coming here. And I visited several other churches. But I walked into this church in March of 2017, and I was greeted by 3 Marthas in succession. And welcomed and loved on, and I haven't gone anyplace else since. You guys do a really good job of that. You welcomed my family when they came a little late. This is a great gift that God has given me in my ministry. Look at all of the things that you are able to do and do with your brothers and sisters here, the fellowship that we have as a family of God in this place, and think, how thankful am I? How much of my heart am I going to put on that altar? And the other part that we find that we use the tithe and offerings for is for the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who come in your towns, that they may come and eat and be satisfied. The aliens, the fatherless, the widows. These are people who have no place in society. They're strangers. They're not connected to any of the clans or families or anything else. Like me when I came in here in March of 2017. Okay? We provide this celebration, this gracious party before God to welcome that stranger. And say, you have a place here and you're part of the family. And that's not just guys who walk in the door on a Sunday morning, but that's wherever we go. That's that person that you see out in the streets and you think, ew. That society says doesn't have a place. But we as the people of God say, you have a place. Come to Jesus. You have a place with Jesus. The widow and the orphan. So in that day and age, there was no feminist movement. There was no independence for women. A woman had a place in society only because she was attached to a man as a wife or a daughter or a mother. That's why with Ruth, when we looked at that story, it was such a big deal when Ruth decides to go back with Naomi. She's a stranger, she's a foreigner, and she's not connected to a man. She has no place in that society. So Boaz says, God has been gracious to me, and I will redeem, and you have a place. So who out there? The prisoner, the addict, the homeless person, the person who talks too much, or the person who doesn't talk at all, that we think doesn't have a place, that doesn't fit. Think of all the odd ducks in your life that we don't think have a place in society. We use the tithe, we use what we lay from our heart on the altar to say to those folks, you have a place here. You have a place in the people of God. So that they may eat and be satisfied. So that as we have been blessed, they also may be blessed. How do we worship? We worship out of gratitude. We worship by celebrating. We worship by taking care of the place that God has given us. We worship by welcoming those who have no place into this place. Let us lay our hearts on the altar